Hey, Cyber World, this is Bo the Mechanic. Today, what we're working on is a Volkswagen Passat. It's a 1.8 turbo, common in very many Volkswagen models. And what I want to show you guys is how to repair a clutch fan. Fan clutch, some people call it. Basically, let me explain what that is. In other videos, I think I showed you guys how to change a thermostat, and I kind of showed you, if you watch that video, the basics, but this is a little bit more. Basically, how your car works is it's got, it's got radiator fluid in it, and it's got a radiator, and that radiator fluid cycles through the block and through the cylinder heads, and it cools down the engine. You guys probably already know that. Well, how it does it is it pumps the fluid with a water pump into the block, and it sits there, and it's got a thermostat, which is just a mechanical device, and it sits there, and all the water is shoved in there, and the pump's pushing it. Well, it can't go anywhere because the thermostat's closed because it's not up to temperature yet. When this thermostat reaches 195, 200 degrees, whatever it might be, that thermostat pops open, and it lets that fluid and the water pump pressure push it out of the car. And when that cold water from the bottom of your radiator, the bottom of your radiator is going to be the cold side, sucks it through, cold water hits the thermostat and it closes again. And so now it started a cycle. So every time it gets hot, it opens up and it lets the hot water flow out, and then every time it gets cold, it pops shut. So when it does that, it shoots it into your radiator, and your radiator is just sitting there. Your radiator is just a heat exchange. And the reason it's in the front of your car is because it's going to use air, the ambient air outside, because there's a huge difference between the 200-degree engine, and even on the hottest days, it's only 100 degrees, probably 110 if you live in the desert. So there's still a huge difference in temperature, and it can always cool it down to 110 with the heat exchange, the radiator, all those thin aluminum strips you've ever seen on a radiator. Here's what a radiator looks like, for a matter of fact. I got one sitting over here. This is off a BMW Z3. That's all it is. So you got water going in, and you got water coming out. And this is just a reservoir tank right here. This just holds water. But so basically, these channels right here, these thicker ones that you see running all the way across the radiator, that actually holds water. And there's lots of them, as you can see. And in between these, this is just soft aluminum. This is just part of the heat exchange. So as this hot water goes in the radiator and it starts to go this way, it's running through these tiny little channels. And these thin pieces of aluminum are just there to help grab air and help cool down these flukes, these little pipes. Okay? And so that's the basics of it. And if you can actually see right through it. I don't know if you guys can see. You can see the sun shining through it when I wiggle it a little bit. So air moves right through it, and that's what it's designed to do. So basically, that's how your cooling system works. But a secondary thing is, when you're driving down the road, it's all fine and dandy because you're going 50 or 60 miles an hour, and wind is shooting through here. All the wind is moving right through your front of your hood. But what happens when you're sitting at idle and you're just sitting in a parking lot, hanging out, you're texting or whatever you're doing, you're sitting idle? Well, how that works then is you got to have a secondary system to try and move some air through here, and how it does it is with one of these right here. This is very common to most cars, and it's called a fan, a mechanical fan. And this uses the mechanical energy of the car. It's hooked to your serpentine belt, like here's your alternator, and it's got a belt, and it spins this thing right here, this little pulley. When it spins that pulley, it spins this fan too. Now, it's not 100% connected. As you can see, I can spin this part, but this part isn't moving. And the reason that is because this is called a clutch fan, a fan clutch. So it allows the fan to spin at a different kind of rate, at a few different rates. Instead of just being a solid shaft like in the olden days, it'd just be a solid shaft, and it spins all the time at one set rate. Modern cars don't do that, and the reason is they don't need it to move air when the car's moving, so it's a waste of energy. It's a drain on the energy of the car. So for better fuel mileage, they've designed this clutch, and the clutch gets overwhelmed by the rushing past air. So it basically just hits neutral, and this thing will just sit here in neutral, but wind is rushing past it because you're going on the freeway. But what happens is over time and time, this is very common, the clutch fan gets just old. And there's the oil seals in there, and the oil seals that hold the pressure and keep resistance against the aluminum piece eventually just break, and you can do what I'm doing right now is just spin it with your finger. I'm barely touching it, and it's spinning. Ideally, it would not be able to do this. It would barely move when I push it. And that would be with a good new fan. So basically, this is very common, and it happens to all cars. Any car that's got a mechanical fan, which is a lot of cars. Some of the Hondas don't. A lot of Hondas actually I don't think have them. But tons of BMWs do, tons of Ford pickups and Jeeps and Chevy trucks and Dodge Rams. And like I said, BMWs, this is a Volkswagen, tons of Volkswagens are like this. Some Audis are, etc., etc., etc. As you can see, this is very common. You're going to see this a lot. And this is something pretty easy for you to change yourself. How I'm going to go about fixing this is I'm just going to take the serpentine belt free, okay, so I can access this right here. And on this specific car, I'm going to unbolt this whole assembly, okay? The whole assembly can come out. Some cars are different. A lot of times what you'll see is a lock nut. You'll see an actual big bolt, and those have to be unthreaded. And they're usually counterclockwise. So if the engine's spinning clockwise, it might spin counterclockwise to undo the nut, or vice versa. If the engine actually spins clockwise, it'll go counterclockwise. Clockwise, it goes the opposite. Either or. But basically, like I said, so I'm going to show you guys how to do this on a Volkswagen, and this is a 1.8T, 1.8 turbo. So here we go. Okay, first question people always have is, how do you get the serpentine belt free? Well, there's a couple different ways. Every different manufacturer kind of tries to change things, and that's just whatever. That's what their prerogative. I don't know why they reinvent the wheel all the time, but they do. On this specific car, this is just a 17mm wrench, okay? And it just slides right over here on the Volkswagens, okay? Most Volkswagens. And so basically you just pull it on it like this, and I'm taking tension off the belt. As you can see, the belt's already lifted up. Now, let's see if I can... So, I'm just going to pop the belt free because I've taken the tension off of it. And there you go. So now there's no tension on the belt, and I pop the belt free. It's ready to go. Now we're ready to pull it free and out of the way a little bit here. I'm just setting it out of the way. I don't even want to take the dang belt completely off because it's kind of a bear to put back on. So it's just sitting down there. And now I'm ready to take this fan free. And it looks like the fan is held on with a couple bolts. So I'm gonna have to do that next. Another word, a lot of cars are different. Like I said, this one specifically, the tensioner is like this, but on a lot of Jeeps, it's gonna be on the back or the front. There might be a bolt, like a 5/8 bolt that you can grab a hold of and twist, or it might have a star bit that you have to shove in, and a star bit that twists. Basically, it's just got a spring in there, so you're just overloading the spring and going the opposite direction from the direction the spring wants to push. So you kind of got to just look at it and figure out what would be the best way to grab it and twist it. Sometimes, like I said, it's a socket, sometimes it's a star bit, sometimes it's an Allen key, and those are very common. And on older cars, they don't really have serpentine belts per se set up like this. The really older cars will have V-belts. Those just take a big pry bar or screwdriver and a couple wrenches, and you put tension on it and tighten them up. But this is for this diagram right here. Okay. So I'm right in here. I'm trying to take this thing free, and I want to show you guys if I can. Right in here, there's a bolt. It's an Allen key. I don't even know what size it is. Maybe a 6mm is what it looks like. So there's an Allen key right there, and we're just going to unthread this Allen key, and this whole fan clutch assembly is going to just slide out. Okay. Okay, I just want to show you guys how I did this. It turned out, I think it was an 8mm. That bolt back there on the back of the clutch fan on these Volkswagens is an 8mm, not a 6, what I thought. I used a really big pair of channel locks. I just slid them over the fan clutch pulley, and I just held it really tight while I broke that bolt free, that little Allen key in the back of it. So if you guys are doing this job, you might want to get a pretty big pair of channel locks like this. Of course, I mean, I've already had them, so that just happened to have what I had sitting around. You might be able to get it to break free too by just leaving the belt on, leaving everything connected, and trying to shove your hand back there and hold it really tight with your hand and the belt's friction, and you try and spin it. That could work. I didn't try that route, but it might work. So anyway, now I'm just going to unthread it, and this thing's just going to slide out. Okay, as you can see, it's already loose just from me doing that. Okay, so this is off. I've got the pulley and everything off. The problem that we now encounter is that it doesn't want to come out. It's kind of shoved in here. And so I'm going to have to go two routes. I'm either going to have to take this alternator free, which is probably what I'm going to do, or the other option you guys could have is taking this radiator hose free, this section of the radiator hose. And I'll show you how to do that just for your own knowledge. A lot of people break these, and they might break either way, even if you're gentle as could be with it. As you can see, there's a metal tab right here, and so this metal tab would just pull up. That metal tab's now up in the up position. All the Volkswagen Audis are all like this. So pull the tab up, and there's an O-ring in here, and you could just hopefully you could just wiggle it and wiggle it and wiggle it and wiggle it gingerly, up, down, left, right, everywhere you can, just barely, and pulling on it at the same time, and eventually get the hose to come off this direction. I'm not going to do that, and I'll tell you why, is because I've done this for so long that I know that's going to break. They almost always break. I don't know if it's my luck or the gods just will it that way, whatever the hell it is. I just know that it always breaks for me, and I always get really upset. So I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is just take these 2 bolts free. There's a bolt right here for the alternator. And there's another one right down here. I'm going to take both of these bolts free for the alternator and slide it back and in this direction a little bit, because I only need a little bit of room to get that fan out. So that's what I'm going to do. I would suggest y'all do the same. If you don't, that's fine. You can go the other route, but just know that sucks, and when they break, radiators cost so much. Okay. Okay, so I just moved the alternator out of the way. I took those 2 bolts free, slid it out of the way. Now you can see it still don't want to come up because it's hitting the radiator hose, but I'm just going to take the plastic free. This is the plastic piece. The plastic piece is bolted to the fan clutch, which is this thing, with a couple of Allen bolts. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 of them, and you can access them right here. This way, you know, it's kind of being lazy. I just don't want to add any air into the system and then have to bleed the system of air once you take the coolant lines free. I don't want to go that route. It's less time and problems for me just to go this route. So I'm just going to take the plastic fan free. And when you do this, a great idea for you guys, because you don't want to flip this around backwards, is to get a paint pen and mark the direction that it needs to go. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a paint pen and just mark the fan going that direction. Because if you flipped it around the opposite way, it wouldn't be pulling air through the radiator, it'd be pushing air through the radiator, and that defeats the purpose. So it's very important that you not orientate this the wrong direction. You want to make sure the blades continue the same direction that they are currently going, and by marking it with a paint pen, that's just how I'm going to go about doing it. Okay? Okay, so I just took all the bolts free. These are your bolts I just took free. They're 5mm Allen key. Just right there. Took all of them free. This thing should just come right off. So there's your blade. Plastic blade, like I said, you don't want to put this on incorrectly. So I went ahead and marked it. As you can see, there and there. Just set it over here in the corner. You don't want it to go the opposite direction. Like I said, it'll push here instead of pulling. And here is your culprit. This thing right here is giving you all the problems. This thing shouldn't be able to spin that generally. See? Pretty fun. That's where that bolt ran through. So I'm going to take this pulley free and I'm going to put it on my new one. Here's my new one. Old piece of crap, new piece of crap. Looks about the same. 3 bolts, 3 bolts. Just take this pulley off, put it right on there. Here we go. Okay, all I did was swap the pulley. This is the old crappy one, it looks like it. Here's the new one. Just swap the pulley right off this one, right onto this one, and took the bolts with me. Now that thing's dumpster, this thing's going back on the car. Okay, so I just put that back in the same way that I took it apart. I just put it down in there, and then I slid my blade in, then I just threaded my bolts in, my little Allen keys that I had sitting here, and now it's tight, and now I'm ready to reinstall it. So I'll just move my alternator a little bit, slide it down in its hole, and line it up with that bolt that I took free. Okay, I put my alternator back on first. I slid my whole unit down in there. I put my alternator back on, and she's ready to rock and roll, and now I'm just gonna slide this little bad boy onto its little bearing and then thread the bolt to the back. So we're done. As you can see, the fan's still going the same direction, everything's going the way that it was supposed to, and everything's back together. I didn't have to take apart the coolant or anything like that. So, it's ready to fire up. Okay, as you can see, it's moving way better. It's moving a lot more air. I can feel all the air coming through. It's not just barely spinning now. So this is how you would do it. If you had any car like this, any Volkswagen, Passat, Beetle, Jetta, or if you even have any pickup truck, it's very similar. It's going to be kind of the same thing. You have to take that piece off. Maybe the bolts are different, but it's the same basic process.